for the influence of various inherent features of metals and on their properties. We talked about grain size, okay, so the grain size, and we talked about the structure. We also have one more parameter which influences the property. For a pure metal, anything else one can talk about? What decides the strength for a pure metal other than its structure? Anything else? Pure metal. I want to make a pure metal strong. What should I do? Can you tell me? Alloying. I don't want to alloy. Tell me. I just do not want to add any alloying element, but I want to make it stronger. One way is reduce the grain size, right? Very easy. Structure is not in my hand because the metal has a particular structure. Okay, so that I cannot increase and decrease lattice parameters because every metal has fixed lattice parameters. I cannot play with it. Right? Aluminum means I do not want to go into the details of this because that is not related to characterization, but there is a mechanism by which the dislocations increase. Whatever is the level of dislocations that are there inside this material, when I deform it to this level, there is an increase in the dislocation. Now my starting material from here to here has higher dislocation density. If I call this dislocation density as sigma 0, I mean as rho 0, rho is the unit that the symbol that is used for dislocation density, okay, because density is generally given as rho. So dislocation density also we call it as rho, which basically means the number of dislocations per unit volume, okay, or per unit area. You can say number of dislocations per unit area or the length of the dislocation, total length of all the dislocations put together per unit volume. You can define in any one of the ways. And if this is rho 0, this will be rho 1. And rho 1 is higher than rho 0. So when you are starting with rho 1 and then now deforming, you are originally starting with less number of dislocation. Now your deformation is happening with a more number of dislocation, and as a result, where you will see the stress required to push the dislocation, which is what is the definition of our global definition of our yield strength. Yield strength, we said, is the stress required to cause permanent deformation, which is actually related to stress required to cause the dislocation motion. And the stress required to cause dislocation motion is going to be higher from here to here rather than from here to here, because the number of dislocations are more. The reason is when you have too many dislocations, each dislocation becomes an obstacle for the other dislocation. It's like, you have too many people. Everybody wants to rush once the class is over. Enough of today. So let us rush back to our hostel rooms. So all of you try to rush through this room. Each of you will be an obstacle for the other. Instead, if there are very few people here and you try to go out, okay, then the obstacles for each of your movement are less. As a result, you can see that as the number of dislocations increase, every dislocation can act as an obstacle. Why? The reason is every dislocation, if I look at a positive edge dislocation, something like this, there is a stress field around this dislocation. The atoms here below the dislocation line, okay, below that plane are compressed, and the atoms above are under tension. Okay, so there is a stress field around this dislocation, and this stress field, when there is another dislocation which is trying to move in the same plane, the moment this dislocation comes across this stress field, this stress field will be an obstacle for the dislocation to move, and as a result, the dislocation does not want to move unless you push it hard, and that pushing hard means extra stress provided to move the dislocation. And that extra stress provided to move the dislocation means the strength has increased. Whenever I need to provide extra stress for the dislocation to move, that means my yield strength has increased. My the ability for the material to deform has gone down. Okay, the stress that I need to provide for the material to deform has increased. Whenever the stress required for deforming the material has increased, I say the material has become harder, stronger. So this is how you can say we can make a material stronger by simply increasing dislocation density. And again, similar to this, there is also a formula which we use. Sigma yield stress is proportional to square root of dislocation density. It is proportional to the square root of dislocation density, which if I plot the yield strength versus dislocation density, I will see a something like this. Okay, that as the dislocation density increases, the yield strength increases. Whereas here, if I plot the yield stress versus d to the power minus half, again here also I see that as the d to the power minus half increases, d to the power minus half increasing means d is decreasing, right? Because 1 by d to the power half is d to the power minus half. If d to the power minus half is d, that this yield strength. The question is, because I now, as I said, if I are steel at room temperature, 0.4% carbon steel. So head of iron carbon phase diagram. Okay, 0.4% carbon. If I ask you, so is not over for you? It must be over now. That means you have washed it off. Small amount of perlite. Can somebody calculate very quickly and tell me at room temperature a 0.4% carbon steel, how much of perlite will be there, how much of ferrite will be there? Do you know what is called lever rule? Okay, very quick. At room temperature, I give you a 0.4% carbon steel, how much perlite, how much ferrite? It will definitely have ferrite plus perlite. Who can give me the answer very quickly? Rough figure. I do not want very accurate. Just some rough number. Nobody. Time is running. No, not yet. You are slow. I know I should have got answer. Yes, anybody? Yes. Tell me. No, no, no. 40% perlite. Huh? And 60% ferrite. What kind of a lever you have used? When I say lever rule, we have a lever with with a fulcrum somewhere, a point somewhere here, a point somewhere here, right? This is how a lever rule is calculated. What are the 3 points? You tell me. What are the 3 points? On the left side, what did you consider? Please hold on. Let one of them talk. What is there on the left side? Point 6.67 is on the left. Point 0.002. Okay. and what is on the right side? 0.67. 6.67. And what is there in the center? Sorry, you are wrong. I think I need to teach you physical metallurgy before we talk about materials characterization. Anyway, that's not a part of this course. This is wrong. You are completely off. Anybody who can tell me correctly? I am asking you, please listen to my question very carefully. I am asking you how much of ferrite and how much of pearlite will be there if I have an annealed alloy, okay, which is cooled and brought to room temperature, and at room temperature a 0.4% carbon alloy, steel, plain carbon steel, not an alloy steel. A plain carbon 0.4% carbon steel, how much of ferrite, how much of pearlite should be there? For that, what is the lever that I should use? If you don't know this, that means you have not gone through your physical metallurgy course properly. This is what is supposed to be learned in physical metallurgy. Yes, you have an answer. I mean 2.14. What is 2.14 on the right side? No, that's also wrong. 0.8. Why? Eutectic point is 0.8. Tectoid. So if you remember the phase diagram, I will only talk about the lower temperature, 723. This is 0.8 for you. And this is what, when a gamma gives you alpha plus cementite, which is on the other side, this gamma giving alpha plus cementite, Fe3C, this mixture is what we call it as a pearlite. Right? And the pearlite composition, if somebody asks you what is the composition of pearlite, pearlite composition has to be 0.8. So if I am asking you anytime the amount of a particular phase mixture or phase, you have to always consider the composition of those phase or phase mixture for your calculation. So if anybody asks you what is the amount of ferrite, what is the amount of pearlite, you need to know what is the composition of pearlite, what is the composition of pearlite, and you should find out what temperature it is. If I say room temperature, at room temperature what is the composition of ferrite? How much of carbon is there in ferrite? 0.002. Okay, usually we call it as 0.006 or 002, something closer, depends on which textbook you are following. Fine. Okay, and pearlite is 0.8. So as a result, this thing should be 0.8 and this thing will be, what is that? And if you do this, you will get how much approximately? How much percentage pearlite? The simplest is call this as 0. I said approximate, I mean 50%. So that's it. Approximately 50%. So the remaining 50% is what? Ferrite. So you will see ferrite and pearlite. And again, one has to be careful that this is only for an annealed microstructure. If I take a normalized 0.4% carbon steel, you will not see this. Why? Because this, I am using the phase diagram to calculate this. And what is a phase diagram? Phase diagram is called equilibrium diagram. Equilibrium diagram means a diagram which is obtained on a slow cooling conditions. Whenever equilibrium is being established. If I am not following equilibrium, if I am doing a fast cooling, for example, if I take 0.4% carbon steel, quench it, what do I get? I get martensite. Do I see martensite in the phase diagram? No, I don't see it. Because it is obtained only on fast cooling, which is a non-equilibrium cooling, and I will not see it in the phase diagram because this is the equilibrium diagram. Whatever is obtained by non-equilibrium cooling, I will not see it in the phase diagram. So martensite will not be there in the phase diagram. So similarly, if I take a material, if I take a 0.4 carbon steel, cool it rapidly by what is called normalizing, which is called air cooling, and when I do that, then you will see that the amount of perlite, amount of ferrite in the same steel are going to be different. Can somebody guess which will be higher? Perlite will be higher or ferrite will be higher in normalizing? Only one of you should talk. Yes, can you tell me? Ferrite will be higher. Why do you think so? Every answer should have a reason, right? What's your logic? I'll come to you. Who is that? You, number 2. I'll come to you. Why ferrite is more? You only give me a direct answer. Many students of mine, when I give a question in the exam, they might write a full page, whatever they know, thinking that let professor search for the right answer in this whole page that I have written. And unfortunately, sometimes I will find that the actual answer is not there in the whole page at all. So that's where the doubt comes whether I should give any marks at all, because he has some knowledge. Okay, should I give marks? Or should I not give marks because he does not have the knowledge that is required for that particular question? Please sit down. Yes. My question is not grain boundary area, madam. My question is amount of ferrite, amount of perlite. Which one will be more in normalizing when I compare with annealing of the same composition? I take 0.4% carbon steel, take 2 pieces of it. One is annealed, another is normalized. Both of them I see it into the microstructure in the thing. That is why we are all talking about why microstructure is important is because of this. Otherwise, I would have been satisfied with composition. If I say that 0.4% carbon steel, irrespective of whatever you do, will have the same mechanical properties, it is not so. You will, if I do annealing, if I do normalizing, normalized micro sample will have higher strength or lower strength? Higher strength. Why is it so? It is because of microstructure difference. And that microstructure, I cannot see it with my naked eye. That is why I use a microscope. And that's the whole, this whatever I am giving is an introduction to jumping into a microscope. Okay? Why microstructure is important is because of this. So why can you tell me which one will be higher? A normalized structure, annealed structure, in the normalized structure, if I compare with annealed structure, ferrite will be more or perlite will be more, or both are same, sir. It does not matter, sir. Both will have 50-50 of perlite and ferrite. What is your answer? A, B, C. All of you possibly should be good at bubbling. Okay. There is no D. D may be none of the above, let us say. Now bubble it and tell me. 1 is ferrite more in normalized structure. 2 is perlite more in normalized structure. 3 is both will be same. 4 is none of the above. Which is right? You can phone a friend if you want. Okay, tell me what is right. Yes, friend. But whoever is answering, they should give me the reason. Okay, get up and tell me. Both are same. Wrong. Please sit down. Perlite is more. You like perlite. So who said that? Perlite is more. Now give me the answer. And to you, I do not know whether you have said it with a conviction or not. You are actually right. Now that I have said it is right, yes, friend, you tell me. Because perlite is more, the strength is higher. My question is why perlite is more. Don't put the the bullocks behind the cart. Okay, we should know. My question is why perlite is more. Because strength is more, perlite is more is not the answer. That is not the answer. Strength is more because perlite is more. I understand. My question is why perlite is more. You cannot again say, sir, because strength is more, perlite is more. But carbon content is the same, not because of diffusion. Any other answers? Yes, you have some answer. Any answer, please tell it out. This is something all of you should learn. I always tell my students, not to know answer is not a sin. Not to know the correct answer is not a sin. Not attempting to know the answer is a problem. You should always put down these whys and attack them. politely to your teachers, and so that his ego does not get hurt. So please ask them. Go to their rooms. Ask them, sir, I don't understand this. Tell me, why is this? Until he gives you an answer. If he does not, then write to people like us maybe, or search the textbooks. Maybe somewhere in one of the textbooks you get. That is how I have done it. Wherever I did not get an answer, my teacher was not answering me, I used to go to one book or the other and kept on for every physical metallurgy. If I have read physical metallurgy, I would have read 5 books for physical metallurgy. If you are reading materials characterization, you should at least read 2 books or 3 books of materials characterization, in addition to what B.S. Murthy is teaching. Whatever B.S. Murthy is teaching you is not a Veda. It's not the ultimate thing. You should be able to get more. In fact, my teacher used to tell me, my job is not to cover the syllabus, he used to tell me. Very profound statement, which I have heard this in 1983. I will never forget this. When I joined for BTech in REC Nagpur, I got a great teacher who is the basic reason why I am standing in front of you as a teacher. And this man told me one statement. Students, my job is not to cover the syllabus. My job is to uncover a part of it so that you discover the rest of it. No teacher is here just to cover a syllabus. He should excite you so that you go back and read, what is this? What is this materials characterization? Let me know more about it. And that is the job of, and that's why many a times I also tell my students that my question paper will not be exactly what I teach in the class. These are the books that you are supposed to read, and anything out of that book I can possibly ask. So this is important. Unless you go beyond your class notes and then read, the subject will not be really strongly imprinted into you. This is very important. Okay. Anyway, so coming back, the answer for that is not that. Anybody else who has the answer? You were telling something, I think. What was that? You are not sure of it. Okay. Anybody else? No. So far, maybe because you have a subject possibly called heat treatment. Do they have? And when is that? Possibly it has not yet started. Is it like that, or it is over? It's also over. And this is sin. This is bad. After the heat treatment subject is over, if you don't know why a normalized microstructure is different from annealed microstructure, I was thinking you are all great souls sitting here. Did anybody tell you that there is a difference between annealed microstructure and normalized microstructure? Yes? What are the differences? Grain size. This is one statement. Anything else? If I take simply one table I want to make now for you, it is very important, which I feel if you want to know about microstructures, you should know this. If I make a table, annealed, normalized, 0.4% carbon steel. What are the differences? Just now you said grain size. Grain size of what? Grain size of what? What does this microstructure show in the microstructure? I mean, if I see it under microscope, what does it show? It shows, if I put it here, it shows some grains like this, and some of them will have this kind of lamellae, and some of them will not have. Have you ever seen any sample under a microscope? You had a practicals of physical metallurgy, right? So you must have seen a microstructure like this. And we call this white one as ferrite, okay, and this one as perlite, right? And if I measure the area occupied by this perlite and the area occupied by this ferrite, again you would see that the area approximately for a 0.4% carbon steel turns out to be 50% is what we just now said for an annealed structure. Again, a very interesting thing is what we calculate this 50% has come from what? It has come from the phase diagram, right? I took a lever, 0.8 on one side, 0.006 on the other side, 0.4 in the middle, and calculated and got approximately 50%. What is this 50%? Is it area percent? Is it composition? Is it composition? It is weight percent. It is not composition. Whenever there has to be a difference between a composition and percentage of a phase. When I say 0.4% carbon steel, the composition of this whole alloy is 0.4%. Everything put together is, that means in this whole alloy it has 0.4% of carbon. But does it mean that this has 0.4%, this has 0.4%? No. This ferrite has much lesser carbon content. It is actually 0.006 at room temperature, whereas this is 0.8. Even in this also there are two phases. Perlite is what? Is ferrite plus cementite, right? So if I call perlite as ferrite plus cementite, what is the carbon content in this? What is the carbon content in this? In Fe3C, how much carbon? 6.67. And in ferrite, 0.006 at room temperature. Why I am again and again saying at room temperature is because at different temperatures it has different carbon content. Whereas cementite at all temperatures it has same carbon content because it's a line compound. It's a compound with a fixed composition, 6.67. So this perlite has two phases, each of them having different compositions, but overall it has 0.8. So as far as composition is concerned, this is what we call it as composition. How much of carbon is there in something is called composition. But when you say amount of the phase, what you calculate from the phase rule, not phase rule, lever rule, is weight percent. The reason is our phase diagram, all the compositions that we are talking about, 0.8 here, 0.4 here, 0.006 here, these are all weight percent. Because these are all weight percent, what I am calculating is also weight percent, the 50% that I get. But once I know the weight percent, I go to the phase microstructure, take the same sample, annealed structure, and see the structure. Will I see 50%? In principle, if perlite is 50% and ferrite is 50%, what does it mean? These white areas that I have here, and if I sum up all these white areas, I should get 50%, right? And if I sum up all these black areas, perlite looks black, right, in the microstructure, unless you go to very high magnifications where you see the lamellar structure of perlite. Otherwise, it simply looks as black. So the black and white regions should be 50-50. But it is not exactly so. Why is not so? Because what I am seeing here is only area percentage. Okay, what I am seeing is a area, 2D area, and area and weight are not directly connected. How do I connect the two? Anybody can tell me? Area can be converted into volume. Can we? Okay. If I can convert area percentage, for example, if I do microstructure, and if I can do, there are techniques called image analysis. Have you heard of it? People call it as quantitative metallography. So if you do quantitative metallography and do image analysis, you can be able to find out how much is the percentage of this. Okay, because we are talking of microscopy, this is very important. So I can find out from the area fraction, I can convert to volume fraction, assuming certain shapes, assuming that these are all, these phases are spherical or cuboidal or some such assumption. By assuming a geometry for that particular phase, I can convert the area fraction that you see on a 2D to actual volume fraction in a 3D, because the whole sample is actually a 3D. The sample is 3D, but the surface that I am seeing is only a 2D. So from 2D I need to go to the 3D and get to know what is the volume fraction of the phase. Usually most of the people assume that the area fraction is equal to volume fraction to solve the problem. But this is a very simple assumption only, but it is not many a times true. It depends on whether the second phase morphology is rod-like or spherical particles or not. If it is spherical particles, it is easy to assume. It is easy to assume that these two are same. But if it is rod-like or so, if it is a rod-like, for example, if you have a microstructure where there is a matrix and a rod-like precipitate, so let's say, depending on where my plane I am looking at it, if the plane is parallel to the rods, okay, then I see the rod as a rectangular piece. Imagine I have rods inside a box. I cut a plane which is parallel to these rods. Let us assume that all the rods are aligned in the same direction. Have you seen any such material where the rods are arranged in a particular direction in a matrix? Yes, you are using a word, composites. In fact, the composites that we use at home. Do you use any composite at a home? Have you heard of any composites that we use at home every day? For example, the chairs that we use at home, so-called plastic chairs, people call them as. These are not actually plastic. These are called FRP, fiber reinforced plastic. Some people also call them as GRPs because they are glass fiber reinforced plastic sometimes. Okay, so that means they are fibers parallelly aligned inside the plastic, and that gives you very high strength because plastic is very soft, but the glass is very strong, and when you put that, it gives you very high strength. So you can have high strength coming because of that. And now if I take a plane which is parallel to all these fibers, I see the microstructure. I see that these fibers look like a rectangles, long rectangles. Okay, right? Because I am parallel to that. But if I do it, perpendicular to that, perpendicular to these fibers, I put all these fibers, take a perpendicular plane, then they look like circles, right? So as a result, what I calculate from these circles, from the area fraction, if I convert it into volume fraction, or from this kind of rectangles, what I get will be slightly different in terms of volume fraction. From area fraction, if I convert into volume fraction, the numbers that I get, depending on which plane I am seeing, whether I am seeing a plane which is perpendicular to these rods or a plane which is parallel to these rods, I will get a different volume fraction from the area fraction that I see. As a result, so one has to correct for these things by knowing the proper geometry, and there are corrections that are available in what we call it as image analysis, what is called quantitative metrography. Knowing the geometry of the second phase in a matrix, one can find out certain equations which relate to the area fraction to the volume fraction. If this is the area fraction that I measure, what is the volume fraction? Some multiplying factor can be used to find out what is the volume fraction. But if all precipitates are only spherical, even spherical also, if there is a spherical particle, depending on where you cut the sphere, you see different things. For example, if I have a sphere, okay, if I cut here or if I cut here, I see a different area, right? But if I assume that these are all uniformly dispersed, okay, some may be cut at exactly the center, some may be cut at somewhere top. But so overall, if I can consider more or less the area fraction gives me an idea of the volume fraction. So people find out. And from the volume fraction, still from area fraction, if I go to the volume fraction, still that value will not be same as what I calculate from lever rule. Why? When will the volume fraction that I calculate from the area fraction that I measure in the microscope be equal to the weight fraction that I calculate from the lever rule? When will these two be equal? Geometry is gone. Once I know the volume fraction, there is no more question of geometry. Is volume fraction equal to weight fraction? What is the connection between these two? If I know one of them, can I calculate the second one? How do I calculate? I know let us say I know weight fraction. Can I calculate volume fraction? By density. So if I have two phases, phase 1 and phase 2, I know the weight fraction of phase 1 and phase 2. If I want to find out the volume fraction, simply volume fraction, okay, or I call it as volume fraction, let's say volume percentage of phase 1, P1 is equal to, I can write it as weight fraction. If I call the weight fraction as W, okay, W1 by rho 1 divided by sigma of W by rho, right? This will give me volume fraction. And so this value will not be same as weight fraction. When will it be same? When will it be same? There will be one condition when both of them will be same. The weight fraction will be equal to volume fraction. When the density is 1. What do you mean by density is 1? We are talking of two phases here. Density is same, not 1. If the two phases have the same density, then it will be correct. And here we are talking of, let's say, ferrite and perlite. Okay, perlite has ferrite plus cementite. When ferrite and cementite have the same densities, then we can actually assume this. But will the ferrite and cementite will have the same densities? No. Why? Because the carbon content in cementite is different from the carbon content in ferrite. Ferrite is mostly pure iron, whereas cementite is not so. So which one will have a lower density? Ferrite or cementite? Obviously, there is only one, either that or this. What's your answer? What is your answer? Ferrite is more dense or cementite is more dense? Why? So carbon more means density is more. Can I say that? Do you agree with that answer? No? Yes. Which is more dense? Pure iron or cementite? Pure iron? Why? If I want to know the density of a compound, how do I find out the density of a compound? Mass by volume, of course. Archimedes principle you will use, something like that, right? But if I do not have the way to measure it, let's say I don't have weighing balance with me to do all this. So how do I find out the density of cementite? I know the composition of it. Can I find out the density? If I know the density of each of them, if I know the density of iron and density of carbon, can I find out the density of cementite? Or if I know the crystal structure of cementite, do you know how to find out the density from the crystal structures? You must have done some calculations. So if I know the Fe3C crystal structure, I know how many atoms of iron are there, how many atoms of carbon are there. I can also find out, right? If I do not have that information, if I know the density of iron and density of carbon, which is higher? Density of iron is higher or carbon is higher? Iron is higher. Carbon is much lower. So if I want to know the density of Fe3C, one can use what is people usually call it as rule of mixture. Okay, the weight percent of let's say the iron in Fe3C and the weight percent of carbon, if you know, in Fe3C, and if you know the density of iron and the density of carbon, you can find out the density of Fe3C by simply summing up the totals, which is called rule of mixture. And if you do that, because carbon has a lower density, the Fe3C has a lower density than iron. And whenever Fe3C has a lower density, then obviously the volume fraction that you measure, I mean not measure really, you actually measure only area fraction, from which you have calculated the volume fraction, and that volume fraction, if I compare it with weight fraction, I will not see that they are same. And that's the reason why there are differences when I calculate what I calculate from the lever rule, what I actually see in the microstructure, both will not be the same. This difference one has to understand. This difference is coming because one is giving weight fraction, another is giving me area fraction, and these two will never be the same unless first that the area fraction and volume fraction, that differences will be there. Second is that there are differences in terms of densities. Unless two phases have exactly the same density, you will not be able to see that both are same. But one can find out by using equations like this. And I calculate the, let's say, knowing the weight fraction, I can calculate the volume fraction. And if I can calculate the volume fraction and compare that with the microstructure now, they both should be the same. Okay? Because what I have calculated from the area fraction, the volume fraction, and what I have calculated from the weight fraction that I get from the phase diagram and the volume fraction that I get from this calculation, and should be the same. This is true provided, again we go back to where we have started, provided that we are following a what is called equilibrium cooling, because the phase diagram is for an equilibrium diagram. Our whole question is that we are not following the equilibrium. That is where we started drawing a table like this. Okay, so now I come back here. Okay, I come back here and I say that if I say take a 0.4% carbon steel, cool it rapidly by air cooling, cool it slowly by annealing, and I am trying to see both the samples under the microstructure, under the microscope, and I see some differences. Do I see differences? I see differences, definitely. What are the differences now? Come back to the same question. Yes, yes, yes. Any link coarse perlite. Very good. Coarse perlite. This is fine perlite. What do you mean by coarse and fine? Bigger grain size. That is the meaning of coarse perlite. Do you use that thing? When I say coarse perlite and fine perlite, what do I mean really? Is it the grain size of perlite? First and foremost, all of you should know. Whenever I am talking of perlite, I should not use the word grain at all. Why? Because perlite is not a single phase. Okay? Ferrite, I can say grain size of ferrite. For perlite, I cannot say grain size of perlite. That's wrong. If you have learned it like that, please correct it. We call it as colony size. They are called perlite colonies. We use the term colony size because it contains each of that has two phases. Ferrite is there, cementite is also there. So as a result, we don't use the word grain size. Okay, of course, it's only a terminology. But more importantly, when I say coarse perlite and fine perlite, am I talking about the size of the perlite? Bigger colony and smaller colony? Definitely, that is also right. In fact, it will have what I say coarse, larger colony size, larger perlite colonies, finer perlite colonies. But when I say coarse perlite and fine perlite, I am not referring to the size of the perlite. No, something else, not shape, not boundaries. I am talking about something else. Fine perlite and coarse perlite means what? What is perlite? Can somebody tell me what is perlite? Mixture of ferrite and cement. That's it. Then what is bainite? You have done a heat treatment course, so you also know bainite. What is bainite? Yes. What is bainite? Then perlite. That's the difference. Okay. Both are ferrite plus cementite. If you simply say perlite is nothing but cementite plus ferrite, that's wrong. Bainite is also that. So you see, it's perlite is a lamellar microstructure of ferrite and cementite with alternate lamellae of ferrite and cementite. That is the perlite. Now, when I say coarse perlite and fine perlite, it is something to do with this lamellar structure, not something to do with the size of the perlite. Do you now get this clue and tell me the correct answer? When I say fine perlite, what do I mean? We call it as finer lamellae. Whenever I talk of lamellar structure, for example, this is perlite, okay? This is alpha and this is Fe3C. This line kind of thing is Fe3C. Usually you will see it as slightly thicker line like this. That is Fe3C. And in fact, if you carefully look at it, this will be more than this. The reason is, if you calculate again using the lever rule, how much of ferrite will be there in perlite? In perlite, how much ferrite is there? If I want to know how much perlite is there in ferrite, I mean how much ferrite is there in perlite, what kind of a lever I should use? Again I put here, okay, and what are these 2 points and what is this? My question, please listen carefully. How much ferrite is there inside the perlite? Perlite is nothing but ferrite plus cementite, that much is known. Now I want to know how much ferrite is there inside the perlite. As I always told you, okay, even if it is wrong, you should tell it out. Okay, yes, no, around 18%. But how did you get? My question is, why is this smaller? I mean, we are trying to calculate this, and my question was, what are these 3 points? First answer that. Around 18%, you are actually right. Okay, no, not around 18%. It is around 12% actually. So ferrite is 88 and cementite is 12, if I remember right. But how do we get is that more important? Anybody can tell me these 3 points on the lever? That is the question right now. Only one of you. Raise your hands and I'll ask you. Don't answer all of you together. Yes, please. Next to Divya. What's your name? Hemlata. Tell me, Hemlata. 0.02, 2.1, middle one is 2.1, 0.8, and 6 points. This is, if somebody asks you how much ferrite is there in perlite at eutectoid. If this is the question, so that's why, this is where the students have to be smarter than the teachers. Okay, when I ask you this question, so how much of ferrite is there in perlite, you should next ask me one more question, sir, what temperature? Because if I draw this phase diagram, okay, and if this is 0.8, and we are talking of at this temperature, the gamma giving you perlite. The question is the amount of ferrite which is there in perlite at this temperature just below the eutectoid is different from what you have at this temperature, room temperature. The reason is that the point that I consider here for the lever rule is different at this temperature and different at this temperature. At this temperature it is 0.025, at this temperature it is 0.006. Whereas this and the other one will remain the same. Because when I say perlite, perlite has ferrite plus cementite. Cementite composition is 6.67. That will never change, whether it is 723 or room temperature. It is always 6.67. And similarly, because my calculation is inside the perlite, we are considering inside perlite, perlite always means 0.8% carbon. So that means this fulcrum will not change. But what changes is the concentration of carbon in the ferrite will be different at the eutectoid and at room temperature. So if you actually calculate, the amounts will be, though there will be a small difference, but there will be a small difference. And if you do this calculation, and you will get approximately percentage Fe3C will turn out to be close to 12%. You can calculate this and then check it later. Okay, you will get that. And that value, exact value, will be different here and will be different here. Though the difference is very, very small, maybe 0.1% or so will be the difference that you get, but there will be a small difference. But this has to be understood. So now that is the reason why in this microstructure, mostly it will be ferrite looks like. 88% is only ferrite. Only 12% is cementite. That's why cementite looks like just like lines. It's like lines separating two alphas. That is how it looks like. That line is nothing but a wall. These are all nothing but walls of cementite inside the ferrite. If I think of this whole building as a ferrite and I construct a number of walls, that is exactly the microstructure of a perlite. Okay, so these walls are all nothing but the cementite walls, and if I cut it a plane, what I see is the lines of cementite. The walls will look like lines, right? So that is what is the microstructure that you see. Instead of they being just straight, they are curved. These walls are slightly curved walls. Imagine the curved walls, and then so as a result you will get curved lines, and that is what is a perlite. And if I look at that because the ferrite being more 88%, this is only 12%, so you see them as thin lines. Now the question is, when I say fine perlite and coarse perlite, I am talking about this center of the ferrite to center of ferrite, this distance. If I look at it, I use a terminology for that distance. What do we call it? Yes, all of you have this knowledge. So this is what is called the lambda, which we call it as interlamellar distance. And when I say fine perlite and coarse perlite, it is this interlamellar distance I am referring to. This, when I say fine perlite, this interlamellar distance is small. So that means if I draw a microstructure, another microstructure which has a finer perlite, I will see something like this. In the same volume, I have this distance smaller when compared to this distance. So this is called coarse perlite, this is called fine perlite. That is what is the difference that we talk about. We'll stop now and continue in the next class. For example, if I take an aluminum with a 1 centimeter thickness thick plate, roll it to, let's say, 8 millimeter thickness, and I want to further roll it to 6 millimeter thickness from 1 centimeter. You would see that the stress required to roll from 1 centimeter to 8 millimeter is not the same as the stress required for rolling from 8 millimeter to 6 millimeter. Though the total reduction is 2 millimeter here, the total reduction is 2 millimeter here. In spite of the total reduction being the same, you would see that the stress required from here to here and the stress required from here to here is not the same. And which is higher? Yes. So when you are bringing from 8 mm to 6 mm, the stress required is higher than the stress required from bringing from 1 centimeter to 8 millimeter.